We're very much entering a period of great competition in the action RPG space. Last Epoch has
There have been so many games that have been coming out recently that I'm actually quite excited for.
Released from early access to fairly good critical and audience acclaim. They've got some pretty
Last Epoch just feels so much nicer than D4, and it's crazy that that's like the community perception as well. D4 looks a lot better, to be fair, but Last Epoch just feels so much nicer.
Record-setting player numbers. They've got a fan base that's pretty damn thrilled about the game.
Yep.
And really, this ARPG renaissance is just kicking off. To check in with the big incumbent, well, things have been vaguely looking up for Diablo 4 based on the team's willingness to pivot based on feedback. Their initial
I don't know if it has been. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, the Gauntlet was kind of a joke, right? It got delayed, what, twice? Twice for a leaderboard adding in a leaderboard halfway through a season is a fucking joke, right?
initial launch of Season 3 was, not exactly fantastic, but they extremely quickly made some changes, and recently they actually said they'll be bringing forward their plans to do a PTR for feedback. That's especially in the upcoming inventory changes. So
I'm actually surprised that they are, because Blizzard is famously very, very, very stubborn. I'm quite surprised that they are, that they're willing to actually do anything.
So, that's good stuff. The PTR will certainly mean they'll step on less landmines, but there are still critics of the game, right? And some of those critics simply will not be swayed by anything that Blizzard produces. Many of them just feel that the Diablo that they want can't be made by that team, that the team maybe has a...
No, and I actually agree. I actually agree fully. The difference in quality... Sorry, not difference in quality. D3 had a much better end game at launch than this game did. Like Inferno was tough, right? Inferno was tough. Going out and farming the Skeleton King rooms was just miserable. All to just push through a push through a difficulty that didn't need to be as hard as it was.
Different vision for the game, and it's pretty much that. Now, some Diablo fans, they kind of know that, and in the past, there have been groups have decided they're going to take things into their own hands, and that is how we actually get 11th Hour Games, who were founded in 2017 because basically they could see the writing on the wall for Diablo 3. Essentially, this is Diablo fans deciding to go and make their own action RPG to cater to their needs, and
it's so funny that the game was made by some people that just didn't like what it was. And I think this is a really good example of... What the fuck am I trying to say? This is a really good example of capitalism at its best.
Not just those Diablo fans as well, because it turns out a lot of people were
not that capitalism obviously has its own issues, but that's not what I'm saying.
Very keen to jump on to Last Epoch when it actually launched out of early access. Let's just do that story. So, they had a 2018 Kickstarter that grossed over $255,000, early access launch in 2019, and it's a global team that was founded.
Isn't it crazy that they can make such a successful game with such little money? Because $250,000 is nothing when you look at how much money is actually thrown around from these higher companies. 250 grand is nothing.
Founded, yes, by people who basically wanted to make something that...
And I'm so happy that they were able to push through with it.
They wanted out of ARPGs. And it's a game that's been in the top sellers on Steam since its launch, and that's inspired...
He doesn't even have it.
February being a month that was full of very, very strong competitive games. And when we take a look at the player counts, it's actually doing very well. It topped out as the 39th most played game on Steam ever. So you do see that spike, 264.
So Blizzard doesn't put out their own numbers anymore. and they haven't since, was it Mists of Pandaria that they stopped putting out numbers for all of their games? I think it was Mists or like around there. I'm not sure. Blizzard doesn't put out their own numbers anymore, but there are like external websites that can kind of help track or help count total players, and it's probably accurate within like 30% or whatever, right? Just because again we don't have all the information. But the numbers that I've seen, this 264,000 peak isn't anywhere close to their concurrent players, which is a little bit upsetting. But you have so many people that are like your gamer dads, your guys who just play Diablo because it's Diablo, right? And don't actually care about much else, which is fine. But that is a majority of their player base, right? It's just people that don't know anything about anything and are playing it because it's Diablo and because they're a Diablo enjoyer. That's it.
1,000-player peak, which is pretty damn impressive. 24-hour peak a bit more recently, being about 150k.
Yeah, it was a very
You can see,
successful
though,
launch.
those numbers will probably drop a little bit more. It will likely settle into whatever its healthy player base is. But certainly compared to many other ARPGs, that's a pretty good performance. And overall, what we see here is a really big success, and it's one that's fueled by a lot of things. I mean, Blizzard's marketing spend on Diablo 4 will have helped them so much. Think about
I think somebody just fell outside. I can't imagine what they spent on marketing. I can't imagine that number. It has to be an insane number.
I mean, there's new names, new faces out there in the creator scene that have popped up in and around like Diablo Immortal, Diablo 4. We've got games like Last
lots of people
Epoch,
came up,
Path
like
of
DM.
Exile 2, of course, and No
I mean,
Rest for the Wicked.
I think
which we'll
Rax got a
talk
lot of
about
followers.
later, all releasing in 2024. And that means that if you like ARPGs, chances are you can play a game that is actually tailored to exactly what you want.
The No Rest for the Wicked is an interesting game because it doesn't fit the traditional ARPG model, aside from it being a top-down, right? And then like randomized gear that drops. I believe it's randomized gear. But the rest of it doesn't really fit the ARPG model. Just in the fact that typically when you think RPG, you typically think of like screen clearing, not fighting off 1 to 2 mobs per, let's say per combat session, right?
Just like today's sponsor is. It's War Thunder. Look, blowing shit up is damn fun, and you can play War Thunder
I've seen a
today
lot about this
for
game.
free across PlayStation, PC, and Xbox with your crossplay. If you click that link in the video description, where for a limited time,
I'm super
if
curious
you're a
how
new player
popular
or
this game
just
actually
haven't
is,
played the
actually.
game in 6 months, you'll get a massive bonus pack with vehicles, boosters, it's real cool, Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, as well as 100,000 silver lions and 7 days of premium, along with more. And yes, that's across all platforms. Now, War Thunder itself is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. It is quite insane. Between tanks, planes, ships, and helicopters, you've got over...
What I find funny about this game is that every ad I've seen for it is the fact that it's the most comprehensive game ever created in the universe ever and ever will be ever for the rest of time. That means that there's a pretty obvious meta, I feel. I mean, I haven't played the game, but come on. I mean, modern tanks are just better than old tanks, right? Modern planes are better than old planes. Again, I haven't played the game, but I mean, just thinking about it for a second, I feel like you'd be able to tell what the meta is.
Over 2,500 vehicles spanning 100 years of history.
That's a lot of vehicles.
And for me, that's just so cool. I mean, I grew up in Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, A Bridge Too Far, and the like. So yeah, this kind of ticks the box for me. War Thunder's got incredibly authentic graphics and sound, a lot of attention to detail that makes for an extremely immersive experience, and that extends to the gameplay, where the damage simulation in War Thunder is very intricate, and it's best explained by just showing you the damage X-ray. It feels so realistic, and it's so much more fun than just a
That is
big
really
HP
fucking
bar
cool.
that you chip away at. And on that, they've got 3...
I feel like actually being able to see the...
realistic and simulator. So
Yeah,
if you want to get your flight
that is
stick
actually
and go
really
full
cool.
sim
I like
mode,
that a
you
lot.
can do that. If you just want some fast-paced, action-driven gameplay, you can do that too. They've got over 70 million players. If you want to become one of them, use my
70
link.
million
And if you're
players.
new or haven't played in 6 months, you'll get that bonus pack.
I kind of don't believe that, right? Maybe 70 million accounts.
100,000 silver lions.
There's no way there's like 70 million people.
That's using my link below.
There's no way. 70 million created accounts, maybe.
Last Epoch. Their pitch is really, really simple. Basically, it's an action RPG that has been refined over the course of 5 years of early access to the point now where it has got an absolute wealth of content.
It's going to see a lot bigger jumps in quality because there's just substantially more people
the top
playing,
line there.
right?
50.
I keep on pausing it. I never even heard about this game until like the past year. So I feel like with the massive influx in players, they're going to see the ability to help the game and fix the game is going to improve drastically, like drastically. Just because of how many more people are playing it, right? Whereas you think of it from even just maybe 3 years ago, where not a lot of people probably knew even what the game was, you're going to have so much more information to pull from.
In total classes, 120 skill trees, very plenty
Which is very good, by the way.
Then enhanced by a crafting system that gives players complete control over their build at all times. That's a massive difference to D4. D4 launched having got quite a lot of things.
Again, one of the only things that D4 really gets right is graphical fidelity. I don't think anything touches D4 in graphical fidelity, from how the characters look, to how the environment looks, to how the monsters look. I think D4 is just substantially better graphic in terms of graphical fidelity. But as we know, and as hopefully a lot of people are sort of waking up to, is that graphical fidelity isn't everything, and D4 I think proves that. Because the game looks like there's no game in the ARPG market that comes close to the graphical fidelity of D4. But it's one of the worst games out there because the gameplay sucks. There's no end game. Well, there is an end game if you want to kill Duriel over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. The Gauntlet isn't that great, and people have already found glitches and ways to cap out their score. Which, to be fair to Blizzard, they have put out a fix for that, saying that they're not going to be counted in leaderboards or whatever. I read that this morning.
Wrong in terms of itemization and buildcraft. They then had to fix things, but by the time that those things were fixed, a lot of people were already feeling super.
And I'm actually not too confident in Blizzard's ability to fix it in the next season, even though they're saying that they're wanting to do a complete gear overhaul, and I think something else overhaul, gear and endgame overhaul in the next season. I don't know if they're going to be able to deliver on that, because that's a really, really big promise and people are holding out for it. But an overhaul is a big job, right? They need to get rid of all of those extra modifiers that are fucking damage dealt to CC'd enemies, damage dealt to frozen enemies that's still CC, damage dealt to full HP, damage dealt to low HP, damage dealt to far, damage dealt to near. All of that shit needs to go.
Super jaded,
and everybody agrees with that.
Whereas here you've got years of early access refinement, right? I mean, yeah, it's not even a fair competition, honestly. Then it's got a trading system built into the narrative of the game that is potentially completely optional if you don't care.
The nice thing about Last Epoch as well is that it just runs better. What is going on outside of my house? It just runs better. I mean, for me anyways, I haven't had as many... Again, this is purely anecdotal, but I feel like I haven't had as many, gameplay issues as I have had with D4. Maybe that's anecdotal and I'm part of the minority, but that's
care about that. And on top of that, there's a fully featured campaign in their own setting, which is pretty heavy on time travel.
To be fair, the campaign is kind of weird, right? Like, there's not really an end to it. It's really... I don't know. I wouldn't call it fully fleshed out. The campaign needs a bit of work, I think.
Which, of course, does allow for a bunch of really cool things.
So I don't think really matters because who plays ARPG for
endgame with monoliths and empowered monoliths that are
campaign,
giving,
anyways.
Of course, the best rewards. This is all quite a lot of stuff, and it's $35 to get all of that stuff.
The one thing I will give credit to Last Epoch for is the build variety. And if anybody follows Last Epoch build creators, there are more and more builds coming out every single day with items that people previously thought were completely useless. Like Falcon Fists is a pair of gloves in the game that I just recently saw a build for that was sitting around the 900 corruption around there. But people previously thought were useless, but they found a way to make it work.
Of course, in
Which is
Diablo
really good.
4, it launched at not being $35 and with its whole, early access for the digital deluxe edition.
I don't personally have an issue with that. I think having like 2 or 3 days early access for a game is fine. And that's an easy money grab. I don't think that's an issue. It doesn't actually harm the game whatsoever. The game will run perfectly the same a weekend. I don't see how that's an issue at all, and I think it's smart on Blizzard's half, and I think more companies should do that.
Thing that just put a bad taste in everybody's mouth. Again,
I don't know.
$35 here. I mean, you can see the immediate value math that anyone will be doing. The value proposition for Last Epoch is absolutely insane. And you might think like, okay,
Yeah, hours per dollar spent is greater in Last Epoch. Yes.
hey, $35, really big game. How the hell can they do it? And I think the answer
It's a little bit lacking in endgame right now. Granted, the Last Epoch devs have said a few times that they are adding Pinnacle content in, which is perfectly fine. Strictly comparing Last Epoch Endgame to how D4 launched Endgame, I actually think Last Epoch is in a better spot. But that doesn't mean it's great. I'm kind of done with Last Epoch right now. I'm just screwing around with random builds. But I'm pretty much done. I can push corruption higher and higher and higher, but what's the point when it's just a number difference? It's just a number difference, and that's not too exciting for me. There's no hard boss to overcome. There's no like T4 Yulra is the hardest boss in the game, and she kind of just falls over once you have a build like 3/4 of the way complete.
answer pretty much is, well,
And as long as you can press your button, that makes you switch times. Like it's not really a hard fight.
they're on their own power, right? They're on their own steam. The Diablo 4 team is a team within Blizzard Entertainment, within Activision Blizzard, within Microsoft, and they will have to be generating as much money as they can and throwing that, of course, into the big happy corporate pot. That's a very different situation to what we
Also, the issue with Diablo 4 and other games like this has been said a lot, is that being too big to succeed, and I fully believe that. The amount of hoops, so say you're a game dev, right? And say you want to fix something, say a bug, say there's a typing error, right? You have to go through this, you have to look at it, okay, I want to fix this. You have to go to your superior, right? And then they have a ton of things to look at. So that's going to be put at the bottom because it's just a typing error. Who really cares? But then the people that are actually playing the game is like, hey, this is a glaring issue. This is maybe a bad example, but then they then have to like approve it. Why? And then they have to tell the dev, yes, you can fix it. And this entire process could take a week and a half, or even until their next patch cycle. Games that are too big and have so many people to go through for simple fixes, I think, end up hurting games so much, because you should just be able to fix the issue and move on in a bug hot fix that you can put out every like 3 days. But that's not how bigger companies work, right? You have a ladder to go up, and then you have to go back down the ladder, which it takes so long to fix basic stuff.
We've got a team who exist to make this kind of game, and clearly for them, $35 is enough to fund their own development. And I suppose that's the point. They don't have to throw money back into that big old corporate pot. They don't have that expectation placed on them. The thing that they're going...
It seems like have a lack of greed as well, because I think they probably could have charged. I mean, I'm I'm Canadian, so my maple syrup bucks are a bit different, but they probably could have charged $50 US, $60 US, which is still less than your typical game, because I believe your typical game is $70 US. I believe, I'm not really sure how much you guys in the States pay, but $70, they could have went just below that and made substantially more money. And people would have happily paid it, because it's a game that's almost fully complete at launch with a development studio that listens to its player base.
Going to need is finances that make them happy, you know, them, the company and the team. That's just different to those far, far, far larger publicly traded companies. Anyway, the value maths here is completely insane. The value
because they're not
proposition
driven
is amazing.
by money.
Again,
They're driven by
games in and around the 30 to
they're driven by the want to make a good game, not by money.
$40 mark that are quite double A. How many of them have we seen recently do absolutely amazingly on Steam to the tune of millions of copies sold?
Helldivers 2 is insane. And I really hope that more companies can take note of what this game does right. I'm very fearful that bigger companies are going to take what this game, what they think this game does right, and not what the community perceives as them doing right. They're going to take the wrong things and run with those, I think. And I think it's a lack of understanding, right?
I think there is absolutely a lesson to be learned in that.
Well, I mean, it's very clearly a lack of understanding. You can look at any AAA game that comes out that took things from smaller indie devs, and it's the wrong things. It's not what people actually like.
Sailing for the game, let's talk about the things that have been a bit more choppy. Number one, they confirmed during early access that they would be adding a cash shop with cosmetics only for ongoing support of the game. Personally, I think that that is an entirely reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, and I trust that they'll keep it fully cosmetic. I mean, they don't have any reason to add power into it when so many builds will clear all the content. I mean, like, even if you're a beginner-ish person to ARPGs, not like new player, but you've dabbled around and your brain kind of works. You can make your own build while leveling, and you can probably clear all the content. Probably even up until Empowered if you're smart enough with actually upgrading your gear and stuff. That's not always true, but most of the time it is. You can't really do that in D4, right? And you definitely cannot do that in PoE.
Game's $35. They're going to be doing ongoing support. We all understand they need to pay.
Which, by the way, I haven't personally bought anything, but they all do look quite nice. I hope they increase the look and add some decent cosmetic rewards to like actual like stuff earned in game, because the stuff earned in game doesn't look that great. So I hope they don't go the route as the only stuff that actually looks decent at all is cash stuff. I think they'd hopefully with the Pinnacle content they add like decent cosmetics.
Pay for that. The thing is, does it feel like they're taking the piss?
Because the cosmetics in game
so
don't
far
look that
from
great.
What I can tell, the answer there is no. There is then the launch itself, where they had pretty damn significant server issues. They essentially were taken back by the scale of the audience response here. Now, this is made better by something that's insane in modern gaming, and that is an offline mode. Now, the downside is the offline mode would lock players out of the game's trading system, so...
Well, yeah, because it's offline. I think adding this in was a pretty good move, and I think that goes back to what I was saying as well, is just the lack of greed. Because, like, really, why think about D4, right? Is why would they not add an offline mode? Well, it's because they want you online so you can spend more money. That's it. That's literally the only reason. So adding in an offline mode is really good. I mean, say your power goes out, you still want to play Last Epoch, that's perfectly, you can still, well, actually, no, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you had a Steam Deck, sure, but say, you forgot to pay your internet bill and you don't have internet, you can still, play the game. Whereas with D4, that's not an option at all. And that really sucks.
I mean, that's not ideal, but kind of comes with the territory. The point basically is, though, there's an offline mode. That's just like a fundamentally good thing.
Yes.
But the reason why we're doing this video like a little bit later is we just wanted to see how things kind of stabilize after, after the launch.
Nobody
Going
thinks
user
it's
and
bad.
critic responses, then things have actually done pretty great. They're at 76% total on Steam, 72% recent, which definitely could be better. But again, you got to take those launch problems into account. So there.
Maybe it's just when I play the game, but I feel like the launch issues were a little bit overblown. Again, I play mostly at night, so maybe that's like, part of my subjective thought on that. But I feel like the launch issues were a little bit overblown. And I'm going to be completely honest, if you're going to throw a huge hissy fit over a game that you can't play immediately, I don't know, man. Like, just play a different game for a bit. Like,
there is that. As you move on, though, you do see that critics are overall quite positive. They've got a top critic average of 80, 84% of critics recommending, people basically recognizing the quality of the game, but also saying it's not necessarily
it's a really
for
good game.
everyone. As an example, I think this whole...
Well, obviously it's not for everybody. Call of Duty is not for everybody. Last Epoch's not for everybody. Genshin Impact's not for everybody. It's such a bad decision to make it for everybody.
Sort of for the fans,
So, yeah,
by the fans thing.
obviously.
Well, that landed not great with PC Gamer's review, which
Who
was
gives
a
a fuck?
6 out of 10, a 60 out of 100.
Who gives a fuck what these journalistic companies think about games? Obviously, some people do, because some people will look at this and say, it's a bad game. Fucking PC gamer Joni McGregor said, it is, not that great, but you should always look at peer reviews. You should always look at reviews done by masses and not by one single person.
100. Most of
I think the best example is Elden Ring, actually. The amount of blowback that Elden Ring got from publishing companies or loudmouth YouTubers that think, what they say is gospel. Imagine if everybody took like the one or two people, Elden Ring wouldn't have been nearly as successful. And I think it's just
for
bad.
them, they felt that the actual moment-to-moment gameplay was more about finding item interactions and raising a damage.
By the way, these people have every right to put out whatever garbage they want. Just, don't listen to them too much. Or at least have the decency to do your own research, right?
Damage number to be higher rather than the actual activity of inflicting that damage. I suppose the kind of game feel side of things. But of course, for many people, they want a lot of that stuff to be good, to be serviceable, and what they really want to dive into is the build craft. And for a lot of people, that's absolutely what this game is completely nailing for them. And well, again, actually just going to PC Gamer, I think this headline from Fraser Brown actually just completely captures it. Last Epoch is everything I wish Diablo 4 was, and the first...
I don't think Diablo 4 should copy Last Epoch. I think they should do what they do best, and they should fix what is kind of fucking them in the ass right now. I think Diablo 4 needs to be its own game. Last Epoch needs to be its own game. I think D4 needs to take some things from Last Epoch. In the same way that I think D4 needs to take some things from PoE. And I think PoE could benefit from taking some things from Last Epoch. Some things, not everything. You don't want to clone your existing game to be something else. Because then a lot of people are going to flock to the original, or they're going to completely abandon the original because the game that took everything is just substantially better. Which, by the way, is exactly what Blizzard used to do, right? This is common knowledge. I think most people in the gaming sphere know this, is that Blizzard used to take things from other games and make them better, and that's why, so many Blizzard games were so good and were revered. But I don't think Diablo 4 needs to be Last Epoch. I think Diablo 4 needs to be Diablo 4, but good.
First ARPG to drag me away from Path of Exile in over a decade.
And I think that is an important distinction.
Though somebody may give it a 6 out of 10, and maybe it's not a game that's super calibrated to say, like, my interests, you can tell that this is absolutely hitting its target audience pretty damn incredibly. And really, I think it's something Fraser captures pretty perfectly. What's really drawn me away from Path of Exile, however, is the build potential. I mean, PoE's got great build potential, so that's quite the praise.
What's really drawn me away from Path of Exile? I think that's probably true. I haven't put a whole lot of time into Path of Exile, so maybe my opinion is a little moot. But it is incredibly important for the beginning of a game to be just as good as the end game. And that is something that Last Epoch does extremely well, right? Like, Last Epoch, the very beginning of the game is kind of meh, because you have one ability. But by the time you hit, like, level 8, your ability bar is full. You're dealing with large groups of enemies, which feel great. You probably have some sort of AoE spell. It feels, the beginning of Last Epoch feels substantially better with having no build at all than D4 does, in my opinion. Again, I haven't put a whole lot of playtime into PoE, but I think something PoE does well is allowing you to build out a specific ability rather quick if you know what you're doing.
There's a smoothness to progression that mimics the more accessible tempo of Diablo.
Whereas Last Epoch, what they do really, really well is they give you a ton of tools and then let you pick from there. So it's actually kind of the exact opposite of PoE. Again, my limited experience in PoE. But then there's also the issue where, like, I'm going to be completely honest, is the reason I don't like PoE is because you have to follow a guide. I actually really don't like that. Hopefully they'll be changing that for PoE 2. I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to what PoE 2 is doing. I've watched a few videos here and there. I watched a video that was put out recently with their kind of rogue archer character going through like different crossbows and stuff. I think that's really cool, but it still has to be good in the end game. So we'll see. We'll see.
But when you dig into the nuts and bolts, there is just so much for theory crafters to play around with here. What we have then is the best.
Yeah, we're still finding stuff. Again, like what I said earlier about the Falcon Fists build, is people, and I do talk to people in game, is people think there's useless items in the game, and I think Falcon Fists is a pretty good indicator that there's less useless items than you might think. Falcon Fists were previously thought to be a fairly useless piece of gear until builds are coming out with Falcon Fists as its main unique, which I think is so interesting.
Best of both worlds, a game where we can go.
There's new builds daily with this game.
Favorite spells rapidly becoming more and more powerful, but one where you.
I've played everything from personal builds to super meta builds in Last Epoch, and honestly, they all feel great. It's not like D4 where if you're not playing the meta, it just feels really bad. It's, you've built this build or this idea of a build, and you've put all this work and effort into it, and it works. You know, you're not going to be pushing nearly as high as the meta builds. Obviously, they're meta for a reason. But it still works, and you're still maybe in empowers in 200-300 corruption with your own build, where you can't do that in PoE because you're going to break your character by level fucking 30, right? And that definitely doesn't work in D4 because the absolute pinnacle content, think Uber Lilith or Duriel, you're probably not killing that with your own builds. You're probably not, unless you are a set-in theory crafter.
Also can spend an inordinate amount of time poring over stats and items as well as passive and active skills until you start to get a headache and just rip off an overpowered build from a much smarter theory crafter.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not against Last Epoch, right? Like, there's every game like that. Like, most people who play WoW most semi-serious people that play WoW follow guides. Because they're semi-serious, which means they have the want or desire to actually push further. That's obvious.
I think is perfectly encapsulating the strengths of this game to its audience. Now, of course, the other sort of side of that is this is all honed via early access. That's why that buildcraft can feel, so complex and full of possibility, but also like something that people can actually engage with. That is the sort of impressive thing that you only get by doing loads of early access. I mean,
yeah, loads by like 5 years of early access. There are quite a few things in Last Epoch that I wouldn't mind fixed or changed. But from an absolute gameplay perspective, I love Last Epoch so much more than D4. And I, again, have not played a whole lot of PoE, but from what I have played of PoE, I prefer Last Epoch as well. Maybe that's just, like half of my brain is smooth and the other half is crinkled. That's why I kind of like PoE a little bit, but I don't know. Last Epoch just feels so much better. Like, you don't have to follow a guide whatsoever. You don't even have to open up external websites.
Loads of internal playtesting.
Which is a positive from a PoE perspective. The positives from a D4 perspective is everything is just so much easier to read. You don't have a billion other things that you're looking at. You don't even really have to look at anything because you can filter out everything you don't like. Like,
I think we would all say
I don't know how
Diablo
D4 can miss that hard.
Maybe 6 months of internal playtesting.
Could you imagine the community perception if D4 just added in a loot filter? All they could do was add in a loot filter and the D4 community would go fucking nuts.
Or just, I don't know, a little bit longer, that it probably would have been able to dodge loads of the landmines that it just stumbled into. Of course, the other side of that is because of all the early access dev, it's an absolutely massive game. So yeah, $35 feels like an absolute steal. So overall, with the amount of content, the player freedom, how well honed the design is, you essentially see people just feeling like they are being respected. And I think that that's the main thing. Diablo 4, whenever it has problems, and has obvious problems, while also being full price, while also,
The issue is not that it has problems. The issue is that the D4 devs are completely blind to it with all of the feedback that they're receiving, right? Every game is going to have problems, but I think what changes a bad game to a good game is the developers' basic ability to look at the feedback and decide that the people that are paying for your game and the people that are keeping the developers with jobs, and they're ignoring all of that feedback. They're ignoring all of it, and it's so bizarre.
Making some of the stumbles that it did, while also having, $25 cosmetics and trying to get you to buy like $70 worth of platinum because you lost.
This stuff really, really, really sucks. But I also kind of don't blame them because people are going to buy them, so who really cares? Right? Like, it's cosmetics, like, what the fuck are you doing, Blizzard? Why do you have a $70 horse? But guess what? People are gonna buy them. The argument is there that could be made for you'll make substantially more money pushing quantity over price. And this is something that major corporations know as well, is that the cheaper you have something, the more of that thing you'll sell, which means you'll be able to make more money off of it because more people will buy it. Like, I'm not going to buy a $70 horse, but if it looks that good for $15, I'd buy it. And I think a lot of other people would as well. Like, a lot of other people would. But not $70.
Also get a horse. That just makes people...
Which, by the way, for $70, the horse doesn't look that great.
People not really feel respected. So, you know, like even just look at this. Half the price of Diablo, more content, better systems, you get 100 stash tabs, free expansions, skill trees, not skill twigs.
The skill trees in D4 are potentially one of the most underwhelming things I've seen. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like I remember Diablo 4 wanting to push more complexity, similar to PoE, because they saw how successful PoE was. Maybe I'm misremembering, maybe this never happened. But I seem to remember D4 wanting to push more complexity to take people away from PoE. And then they gave us 5 points into a skill, 1 point, and then you get to pick one other point. That's not complex. It's just not. Because even just looking at it some of the time, not all the time, but even just looking at it some of the time, you can be like, yeah, this is just objectively better. There's no decision to be made there. Like at all. It's not complex.
Loot filters. I mean, even as something, you know, simple like a loot filter. Yeah, where's that launch of Diablo 4?
I don't know why
Actual crap.
Loot filters is such a huge thing. Such a huge thing. And the fact that you can have 75 rules with, or sorry, 75 like filters, and then rules within those filters that could take out so many things, and that you can recolor gear, or like recolor drops on the ground. Their loot filter is one of the best in any game I've ever seen ever. It's insane how good it is. Free expansions on the D4, yeah, I hope so. I mean, I haven't seen devs talking about that, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't look at a whole lot of dev stuff. You get stash tabs, 100 of them. They actually just put something out recently that they're talking about reducing stash tab size, so we'll see. Already more content and better systems. More content, I'm hesitant to agree, but better systems, yes. 3 endgames before the game is out. I mean, there really only is one endgame, right? Which is empowered monos. Just because you do something at the latter end of your leveling experience doesn't mean it's endgame.
Crafting 3 endgames before the game is out. I regret spending 200 plus hours on Diablo 4. And I think what that speaks to is the inherent weaknesses of AAA development at the scale of Diablo with a team size like the Diablo team, which I believe is like over 500 people. It might be 600. I think it's actually the largest team.
I wish that would stop happening.
Larger than the Warcraft team. I at least heard at one point. But obviously, like, with a team that large, how the hell do you get to be agile? Whereas this...
You don't. You don't. You become a rigid machine as opposed to a fluid machine. And that's what I was talking about earlier as well, is you have so many steps to go through to get anything done that it takes forever, one. And let's say, as an example, if one of the higher-ups thought that this could potentially lose them money, it is an immediate no. Regardless of how good the change may or may not be. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but there's zero thought as to what the players would benefit the players as opposed to benefit shareholders, which makes sense, right? Like they have to put their shareholders first. Every single large company does this, right? It's the same reason why you go to Walmart and there's 2 tills open in fucking Walmart rush hour. So they can spend less on labor, right? Like, it's for these bigger companies, it's always going to be dollar signs first before anything else, until they start losing money, which it is still falls in line with dollar signs first. Because as soon as their dollar signs start becoming less dollar signs, then they fix what people want, and then they put it in as, oh, we're actually listening now, yada yada yada. Blizzard does this every single year. Blizzard does this constantly. As soon as numbers start dipping, oh, we're going to listen, we're going to do better, you know, we're going to be the Blizzard you want. They've done that for years in a row, and people still keep falling for the same shit. It's impressive how stupid a majority of Blizzard gamers are.
It just seems like a team that is appropriately sized to the project.
Which, by the way, I love Blizzard products. I've played WoW since January 2007. Yes, I know my start date. I played Diablo 2 before that. And I will probably play Diablo 5 whenever that comes out. And I'll probably play the next WoW expansion. But that's because I have no self-control and I'm a Blizzard Andy.
Project with a very clear mission that's just able to go and do their work. Probably not dealing with, well, Blizzard news.
See, this is kind of what I'm saying here.
Very clear mission.
Like this, hold on. This looks pretty cool, right? Like you got your like shoulder pads, that looks cool. The red looks nice. The skulls, those are bird skulls. You know, this looks really cool. This is like in-game cosmetics. This is like what the gear looks like. This kind of looks like shit, right? So this is what I mean by I hope they actually add in-game cosmetics, and I hope they don't keep all the cool stuff for the shop. It doesn't look, sorry, it doesn't look like shit. It looks very bland. The helmet looks stupid, I think. Why do you have a unicorn or a rhinoceros horn? That looks fucking weird.
Just able to go and do their work. Probably not dealing with.
And like it's purple. I would love to see them add in a coloring system, so you can actually add in like or change the colors of specific parts of gear. So like this is purple, 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 purple. Like maybe I want to make this red or teal or blue or whatever the fuck else. That's probably not going to happen. By the way, that's also something else I think D4 does really, really well is their transmog system.
With, well, Blizzard news over the last few years. Let's just cut a long story short and leave it at that. Plus, it's an indie who are overtly ARPG fans, which, I think just means people will be more predisposed to give them the benefit of the doubt, to like them, right? To just think and feel favorably about them. And where this gets interesting to me, when you look at streaming figures in February, you can see the launch of Last Epoch. You can see how it directly follows on from the launch of Diablo 4 Season 3. So comparing the last 3 months for these games is fairly in.
Well, let me see here. March, ongoing, hours watched. I don't know if this is the best thing to do because streamers are going to flock to the newest, biggest thing because that's what's going to get them the most views and that's what their community typically wants, right? However, he did say with the launch of Season 3, I still think even if Season 3 was a bit better, you would have seen the bigger streamers going to the newer game. So this isn't entirely fair, I feel.
Interesting, right? I mean, okay, January 2024, Last Epoch is fairly low, right, in all of its numbers, whereas Diablo is sitting there at about 3.65 million hours watched. February's a bit different, though. We got 14.5 million for Last Epoch, and we've got 1.9 million.
That is such an insane fucking number. That is nuts.
For Diablo. I mean, even just looking at the peak viewers, the average
tell
viewers.
Here, it's funny, you can tell here people hopping on the hype train.
Last Epoch's launch is 250,000. Diablo is below 100k for all of those. You look at the average viewership, Diablo is once again far, far, far smaller. I mean, even if you're going to go like a little post-launch, you can see like, say, March 2024. And I know we're only really like a few days into March, but you look at the average viewers. Diablo 4, 1,720.
Yeah, this is going to go down. This is also going to go down, right?
Whereas Last Epoch is at 22.6k. I mean, that's kind of crazy. You would not think it would look like that. And I think what that does show, though, is
that's fairly obvious, player base,
right? And it's not just the players, it's the streamers. You can't play D4 and Last Epoch at the same time. So clearly Last Epoch is taking those Diablo players. I think it really is. And
it 100% is, because the general online consensus, and I say online because there's a lot of Diablo 4, not even D4 Andes or D4 Simps. There's just a lot of people who play D4 because it's D4. You know, people that aren't terminally online, people that just want to play a game and, you know, they come home from fucking building houses and cleaning shit out of people's sewers, you know, like plumbers and shit. They just want to sit down, they just want to kill some mobs and hang out with the wife and kids and go to bed after that. They don't care about all this. And I think that's important to keep in mind. And also, what I was saying earlier is I think the numbers for D4 are probably a lot bigger than you think because there's a lot of those people.
You can kind of look at like Path of Exile as a bit of a control here. It's, I mean, it's got smaller numbers than Last Epoch. I mean, obviously Last Epoch is the big new hot thing that's also had a launch. But yeah, like PoE is just getting more than Diablo 4. So you can really see that.
Well, I think it's because PoE is more exciting to watch, right? PoE is a lot flashier. PoE, the end game will, it doesn't change, but it changes in the way of like maps are different and how the maps are built out is different. Where D4, the end game, like what is Diablo 4's end game, right? Diablo 4's end game is getting a group, maybe doing carries, and you're going to kill Duriel. Cool. Well, now that that's done, I'm gonna go hang myself in the game, not IRL.
The competition is heating up here, and for Diablo 4, they've got no big content update until the Gauntlet stuff launched. So, I mean, we're kind of just seeing
And the Gauntlet's a joke.
what people are actually just grinding the shit of right now. I think the answer is it's Last Epoch, not Diablo. So ultimately, we see what players and streamers are doing. They're flocking to the newer things.
D4 just looks so much better, and it looks so much more visceral. And I really wish D4 was good because it looks so much better.
With D4, I think they'll need to have a Season 4 that really does feel kind of gargantuan. Who knows, maybe the whole, even-numbered seasons are good. Maybe that will come true again. What?
Yeah, that was true in D3, wasn't it? Is every... so it's my understanding that they have different teams. They have different teams that make the seasons, so that's why historically you saw that happen in D3, is that the other seasons were good, and then the off seasons were not good. I think that's why, and I think that's semi-common knowledge is that they have different teams working on seasons. It's so they can work on seasons at the same time, right? Maybe we'll see that the even seasons are good, similar to how they were in D3. Maybe we'll see that. Maybe we won't. I don't really know. But it is interesting that the odd seasons we've gotten haven't been that great, and the even seasons with Season 2 have been their better ones. So, I mean, we'll see.
What does Diablo care about? Does it want to go for the more sort of mass market audience who, they're interested in Diablo for more just like the experience of playing that game, finishing the story, dicking around for a bit, and then kind of being done? Is it about getting
maybe
sort of $60, $70 from those people and then just...
I think unironically it is. Because that is how they get more money. If you can appeal to the people that are not terminally online, if you can appeal to the people that like Diablo as a name and as a franchise, you will earn more money, because there's more people that do not read online garbage than there are those who do, and those are the people that are buying and still playing the game. Again, we don't have actual numbers because Blizzard doesn't release their numbers. But I think if they did, you would see that D4 is still wildly more successful than either of these other games. At least from... like, you can only look at Twitch numbers as interest in the game from people who are terminally online, right? I think that is true. And maybe I'm not fully explaining this correctly, but there's a lot of people who don't go online to look at guides. There's a reason people say that as soon as you start watching videos, you become... you're no longer a casual gamer. Like, this is accepted within the gaming community. So, I don't know.
Something smaller for the live service, or is Diablo's next expansion almost going to be trying to do a bit of a Reaper of Souls to the whole thing, like actually trying to truly reinvigorate the end game sort of design? Kind of hard to know.
I really hope it does.
It's tricky though. The challenge,
because I unironically really want to enjoy this game. I really do. If I could play D4 more than any other game, I 100% would.
of being a big incumbent franchise and that being made by a really big team is they lose agility and it's really hard to serve everybody equally, whereas a smaller team can just go and make what they know a hell of a lot of people like. They can focus on that and they don't feel like they've got to make those trade-offs for the more mass market. Because look, like you're maybe your average person on PSN who's just browsing about, if they were to see like a Last Epoch versus Diablo 4, maybe D4 would actually just be a better time for them, right? And to
Yeah, I agree. I think there's more casual friendly stuff in D4 than PoE, than Last Epoch, than most games, by the way. Like the people that are playing D4 are the same people that are buying the new Call of Duty every single year. And you might think that, oh, Call of Duty's dead, why would you play Call of Duty? But don't they break records every year? Like, don't they have the most selling game every year? So how can you say that these games are dead when this is happening, right?
really focus in on that, well, take a look at their website. 11th Hour Games is an all-remote indie development studio currently working on Last Epoch, right?
All remote is insane. The fact that they can do this, who was it? I think it was Ian that was talking about, Ian from the WoW team. I think it was Ian that was talking about having a huge benefit to having everybody in the office for the, man, what the fuck am I trying to say? Like, for the ability to have more ideas floating around and easier to pick things apart in the office and maybe like have a whiteboard or whatever the fuck, however the fuck they do it. But being all remote is such a huge thing. And it's unfortunate that more companies aren't looking at this. Even from a financial standpoint, think about how much more money they would have. By the way, and this is a reason I think they can charge a lot less. Think about how much more money they would have if they didn't have to pay for mass spaces. Right? Like, think about how much more money they would have if they didn't have these enormous fucking buildings with thousands and thousands and thousands of employees in there. Even if they kept those buildings and had everybody at home, they would still make substantially more money. Because you would be paying less for electrical, you'd be paying less for utilities, you'd be paying less for stocking the fridge with water, you'd be paying less for all of these things. And in an insane way, I don't know if they actually understand that.
Remote indie team. How much do you think Last Epoch costs to develop versus D4? Blizzard they have to offer people a lot of money because they're making games in California.
In California,
the most expensive place on earth to make video games. Whereas if you're 11th Hour
and again, like, imagine if they just weren't in California. Imagine how much more money they would make. Now, you want to be in California because that's where all the talent is, but being in California puts you at such a high wage requirement for all of your people that you spend so much money. So even then, just imagine how much more money you would make. And by the way, isn't California like super unfriendly to a lot of large companies now? Is that not the case? Like, I know more and more companies have been leaving California. Think about how much more money they would make if they were in Texas. Now, I'm not in the US, so maybe I'm not familiar, but anywhere other than California, I feel like they would make substantially more money. It's a very interesting decision.
Doesn't have to be like that.
Don't close that branch. Just move it.
So it is one of those things. If game development is just getting stupidly expensive because it's hyper clustered in and around, that area, with a lot of maybe VC-backed companies, large publicly traded companies, I mean, the cost effectiveness. I don't exactly want to bring up current events, but let's just say the ability to make munitions, right, has been talked about, between, I suppose, the more, Europe and you can see I'm really trying to dodge all the different words the YouTube bots may, slap the video for. But basically the point is, right,
I'm not sure how that affects game dev. I mean, I get what he's saying. I don't know how that affects game dev. Maybe I'm not smart enough to think about it, but I don't fully understand where he's going with this.
Old Cold War dumb shells, made in the old style. That's a lot.
Actually, the exact opposite, because typically in times of war, in times like this, people look towards things that make them feel good. And this is historically true as well, right? Like, think of like the Roman Colosseum. Those things were happening in times of war and in times of political outrage, because the Colosseum was entertainment. Like, you would go and you would watch that to take your mind away from things that are currently happening in the world. So I don't actually understand what he's saying here.
Cheaper than the Americans going and making the best goddamn dumb shell that could possibly ever be made. And it costs an absolutely eye-watering, insane amount of money, even though the thing that's actually needed is a shell that goes into a thing and goes from there to there and goes boom. You know, it's almost, what is it like?
So he's saying that game devs are worried about making a perfect product as opposed to just putting out a product that's good. I agree. Because the basis of trying to make a perfect game is you're trying to please everybody. And you can't do that, right? Like, being able to make a perfect game means that you make everybody happy, and that's just not possible. Because if you make everybody happy, nobody's happy, because the changes that they want to see aren't happening because they're trying to make Joe happy when Tim wants something completely different.
Like, comparative advantage, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, maybe comparative advantage is what we could talk about here. But I suppose, I just think, if you're to give 11th Hour Games 100 grand, Blizzard 100 grand, I think Blizzard will probably make nothing with
I don't even think they would notice it. I think that would be gone within the first 2 days. And I think that it would all go towards labor expenses. Unironically, I think that would all be gone instantly. Actually, it wouldn't even be gone towards labor, okay? It'd be going towards a bonus to somebody. Right? Like, some of these guys, I'm not even talking about the CEOs, I'm not even talking about upper management. 100 grand to a lot of the better developers, I don't think is a lot of money. And I don't mean you're like your average developer. I mean like developer management, right? So like not your owners, not your CEOs, but also not your lower middle guys. I think you could split 100 grand within 3 bonuses fairly easily. Whereas, I mean, how big is the last Epoch group? I would imagine it's not any bigger than 40 people. Maybe I'm entirely wrong there, but that just logically makes sense.
100 grand, I think 11th Hour Games would actually be able to make something with 100 grand, right? Yeah, when you're a company like Blizzard.
I think they'd be able to make a lot with 100 grand. I think that would help their development substantially.
The numbers that you're dealing with are so wacky and insane, and I think that just warps everything.
Like, they could bring on 2 or 3 more developers for that money.
Way that's not exactly best for players. Anyway.
And actually, maybe that's not even a good thing, because you eventually start suffering from success. Right? Like, you eventually start suffering from the fact that you have too many people in the kitchen.
That's my thoughts on that. So
I actually take back my statement, and I think they should keep roughly where they are, because roughly where they are has been working.
Seeing people who love games starting to make games and essentially saying, what is the game that my younger self would love to play that would be good if my younger self came across? I think that's like one of the most pure ways, I suppose, and great guiding principles when it comes to maybe what you want to do.
Based off of build variety, like strictly build variety, Last Epoch is a substantially better game, and there's nothing that's even, like, based off of build variety alone, Last Epoch is better than PoE, 100%.
The sorts of things you want to make. I wish
for end game build variety that is viable.
him luck, and I suppose we'll be back next month with a little bit more of a look into No Rest for the Wicked. Again, thanks to War Thunder for supporting our team. You can play today in PC.
I think No Rest for the Wicked is a very interesting game, and I'll probably play it once it comes out. Once it comes out. But it's also not a traditional. It's like ARPG light kind of thing, right? Like maybe I'm wrong about this, but when I think of ARPG, I think of screen clears, map clears like real fast. You press 3 buttons and everything on your screen is dead. Where that's really not the case for No Rest for the Wicked, and I think they're using the ARPG name to benefit as much as they can, and kind of because it's top down. Not to say that it's a bad game, because the gameplay I've seen of it has been really good, but come on.
PC, PlayStation, and Xbox with my link, and again,
It's
if
not
you're
really
new
the same
or
thing.
returning, you'll get a massive bonus pack across.
I have to go to the bathroom. I'll be back in a second.
All platforms, including multiple premium vehicles and all the other goodies. And the bonus pack is available for a limited time. So that's it for the video. Be sure to check out War Thunder to support our team. With that said, thank you so much for watching today.
Yeah, I think he makes a lot of good points. I think not everything he says I agree with, but come on, if you're agreeing with everything everybody says, that's weird, right? Anyways, I did want to look at
Friends,
this.
once again,